And in this journey, the challenges which they have faced, which they have been able to overcome, the targets which they are now seeking to gain, and the other insights they are going to be sharing with us in this session. Ladies and gentlemen, we just seek your support in terms of starting our sessions on time. There's also another session which is planned in the same hall in the evening. We need to vacate it as per the schedule which is there. And for that, we need to start our sessions on time. So please request for your cooperation. Kindly be seated so that I can invite our speakers and we kickstart the session. So as we talk about the success, almost 95% of the commercially exploitable wind resources are located in 7 states: Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu. In this session, we have the movers and shakers states who are going to be sharing their progress, their challenges and further targets. I invite the distinguished speakers of the session: Thiru Rajesh Lakhoni, the Chairman and Managing Director of Tangenco; Mr. Bhaskar Sawant, the Principal Secretary, Government of Rajasthan; Shri Dinesh Jagdaliji, Joint Secretary, MNRE; Shri Rudrapaya, Managing Director, KREDL; and Shri JP Chalsani, CEO of Suzlon Energy. May I request our distinguished speakers to please grace the dais. Requesting once again the distinguished speakers of the session: Thiru Rajesh Lakhoni ji, Shri Bhaskar Sawant, Shri Dinesh Jagdaliji, Shri Rudrapaya ji, Shri JP Chalsani. And the session is going to be moderated by Mr. Koel Kumar Mandal, the Chief of Program, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, who brings in strategic leadership and guidance to Shakti across program verticals. He brings to this position over 15 years of leadership experience in designing and implementing various programs in climate resilient infrastructure and international climate finance. Once again, a request to the people who are standing. We already have our distinguished speakers of the discussion on the stage. We are ready to start. Can I request people... May I request everyone to please take your seats, please. So once again, welcome to our speakers. Thank you to the audience, and I hand over the stage to our moderator.
Thank you, and welcome to the first panel discussion. I think the context was very well set in the plenary discussion regarding wind and the journey we have had so far. This session is largely around success stories. And I'll start with a short story from my side to begin this panel. Many of you may know I work with Shakti Foundation. We are a philanthropic foundation that work on climate research and action in India. And we have 5 other sister foundations, one foundation in Brazil, one in Mexico, one in Indonesia, one in China, and one Africa Climate Foundation. They all work in climate action in their respective geographies. So earlier this year, in May, we all came together as regional foundations. And all of them came up to me and all of them said the same thing. draw a lot of inspiration from India's renewable success story. What is it that you did and how did you do that? This is something that everyone said, and this is not just these foundations, but everywhere I travel, especially in Global South, people come up to me and ask the same question about India's renewable success. And I'm sure each one of you, when you travel across the globe, you hear a lot about this. And this success is in no small measure by the people and the institutions represented on the dais, but also efforts by each one of you in this room, and also a lot of people outside the room. So we'll take a moment and appreciate that, hear a bit about these success stories from the panelists today. But at some point, I would also like to open this discussion up for people in the room to share some of their success stories. We'll also pause and reflect for a bit before we move ahead and talk about where we go next from here. Of course, the job is not done yet, like we heard in the plenary session. We have a long ways to go. But I think it's often good to take a pause, pat ourselves in the back a bit, and reflect a bit on the success. So with those words, let me request first Mr. Rajesh Lakhoni, CMD Tangentco, to share your Tamil Nadu story, sir. You started in the morning already by talking about your repowering story and your banking story. Would love to hear a little more about your Tamil Nadu story.
Coming from the state which started wind much earlier, so I had a lot of requests to MNRE also. I don't know if this session is the appropriate session, but I would like to flag issues as well. I just wanted to say how many of you are wearing T-shirt. I doubt anyone is wearing. If you have T-shirts in your home and you just see if it is made in India, I just like to say the T-shirt is made through wind energy. That is because I'm saying any T-shirt which is made in India, the chances is that 50% T-shirts are made purely through wind energy. It's a green T-shirt you can claim because it's a purely green T-shirt. Europe is talking about green manufacturing. The T-shirts in India are always green because most of the T-shirts, you must have heard of Tirupur cluster. Tirupur is a cotton textile cluster where T-shirts and all the inner garments are made there in Tirupur, and it takes care of the total exports of 35,000 crores. And India also, it caters to a huge number. I think 50% of the T-shirts, cotton T-shirts are made from them. And this cluster has grown only because of wind energy. I think, mark my word, I'm not just doing for to make audience attract attention. In Tamil Nadu in 1981, the first windmill was erected, and 83 banking was introduced. What is banking? Now every one of you must be knowing banking. Now the banking is what has caused the growth of this cotton cluster in Tirupur in Tamil Nadu. Why? Because spinning mills, basically they are most of the expenses, 65% of their expenditure is basically on electricity charges. Any spinning mill you put, 65% expenditure is on spinning and electricity charges. And Tamil Nadu is not a cotton producing state. Despite that, a lot of spinning mills came because of 4 things. One was, most important thing was banking. Banking means whatever you generate for 4 months, you can use it for 1 year, and this till next wind season comes. Because of that, once in windmill, how it generates is once you make a capital investment, your generation cost is fixed for 25 years. So that is what, so their electricity costs were hedged because of windmills for 25 years. So their cost, they had predictability of expenses on electricity, which is 65% expensive. So a lot of spinning mills started coming into Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, mind it again, is not a cotton producing area. Just because of one policy in 83 that will provide banking of wind energy, all the cotton mills came in a Tirupur cluster, which I think world's one of the 10 biggest cluster for T-shirt manufacturing and cotton goods manufacturing is developed in Tamil Nadu. The second thing, I think, why the Tamil Nadu success story started was 2 other things. One was accelerated depreciation of MNRE. And third thing, which is very unique in Tamil Nadu, is that all these windmills have come because of the Section 3 Rules Electricity Act, which allow captive power generation to be used. There are no big wind farms. All the units are owned by small. Each unit is owned by a small spinning mill factory or some small manufacturing who is wheeling it and allowing open access for hedging the power cost. So these were the 4 things: banking policy, accelerated depreciation, open access under Section 3 that you can, so these were the 4 things for growth of wind energy there. Now the disadvantage of it is that we have a decentralized development of wind power in Tamil Nadu. Almost we are 10,000, we have crossed 10 gigawatt, 10,125, and another 291 is in offing. Now, this has all happened is around 6,800 is captive. So all the 8,000 wind owners are there. There's no wind farm. Now that brings in major challenge for us in repowering. Now the repowering requires micro-siting gets changed. We had 5D and 7D. Now this 3D and 7, now that whatever you do in the wake effect, bigger building, bigger machines, that is also causing a lot of issues. So I had a lot of requests, but perhaps next round of opportunity, I'll make the request to MNRE. And I'll just say, Tamil Nadu has grown because of a different model. People want to hedge their electricity costs, and windmill with accelerated depreciation and the captive consumption and open access policy allowed it to hedge the generation cost of electricity for 25 years. And that's why most of the windmill has come. The last thing I'll manufacture, I think whatever car you own, 1/3 of the car are manufactured in Tamil Nadu, and most likely Ford, Hyundai and other things, if you're owning it, it is coming from Tamil Nadu. And that also is powered by green energy. Most of the cars, if it is made in Tamil Nadu, you are using a green manufactured car. So T-shirt and car, please remember, if it is coming from Tamil Nadu, it's green manufactured. And that we have to thank wind energy for that.
Thank you so much, sir, for those insights. And it's not just a story of, it's also a story of energy transition and jobs and local innovation, like you spoke about. Let me turn to Mr. Bhaskar Sawant now from Government of Rajasthan. Sir, if you could please share your opening remarks.
I am not expert of wind energy as such, but I am user of the energy. And while using various forms of energy, to begin with, I joined this sector almost 2 years back. And to begin with, I always thought that solar energy is very, very important. And of course, it's very important. But then 2 years back, in Rajasthan at least, there was sort of solar euphoria. So hardly we used to talk about wind. But then as I gained experience in the field, and I must mention that even now, whatever energy we are purchasing, our discoms are purchasing, actually there is more installed capacity of wind than solar. And we are getting wind energy at a very appropriate time. As of now, we are having 3.7 gigawatt of wind compared to 3.3 gigawatt of solar. Generally, we tend to think that in Rajasthan, obviously, there must be much more solar than wind. And there was definitely no addition phase since 2017, 2018, because of the facts, as you know, obviously, accelerated depreciation and reverse auction. These things actually took toll on the new installation of the wind. But then now, again, wind is gaining prominence, and we are actually desperately looking for addition of wind. One of the major reasons is that we are quite away from mines, and it's very difficult to get coal to the distant thermal power stations of the Rajasthan. So most of our energy, it is actually vested or engaged in talking to officers of railway so as to ensure that the required numbers of rakes are made available and coal actually reaches to thermal power plant. And we are actually suffering so many problems of thermal, besides pollution, which is in general, to maintain that supply chain and to ensure that coal actually reaches to the station is a huge task. And last year, I vividly remember, last year in month of May, and there was no way out how we are going to manage with depleted coal stock. We had almost only stock of which was sufficient for 3 to 4 days. But then there is slight change in seasonal appearance of wind, and there was very substantial wind in last May, and that actually saved us from we were actually steering in the eyes of substantial power crisis, and wind ensured that we are through. And since then, and as today, MNRE has published this new potential wind energy potential mapping, which is as per 150 meter, I think. So previously we were 127 gigawatt, and now obviously I think with mast height increasing, potential of Rajasthan must be slightly more, and a lot of virgin untouched tracts of land are available, and we are substantially working so as to make these available to sincere and potential developers so that maximum potential happens. Only challenge that we are supposed to overcome is that evacuation has to be there, and PGCIL has been investing very substantially. But then STU, Rajasthan Vidyut Prasaran Nigam, we are also again supposed to invest substantially and implement our project on fast track mode, so as to ensure that wind energy is evacuated. That is one step. And one more thing, I think, as a people from wind energy section, you also should push for policy advocacy, that generation and evacuation is not enough. Unless our grids and grids at EHV level as well as grids at distribution level become smart, we won't be able to tap full potential of wind energy. Because it's resource, it's extremely important resource, but if our grid is not smart enough to adjust its consumption curve as per generation curve, that resource is likely to become a headache. And I think we should not let that happen. And for that, we should definitely ensure that there is policy advocacy or demand or force which ensures that grid becomes very smart both at EHV level as well as distribution level. So as of now, this is what my initial thought, and I would like to listen from you people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you started alluding toward the end about the challenges as we go ahead towards the future for the kind of potential that wind has we were talking about in the morning. So we'll get to the challenges in this second half of the discussion. But let me turn to Mr. Jagdale now, Joint Secretary MNRE. Sir, okay, sir. Sure. Let's turn to Mr. Rudrapaya now. He's with Karnataka Renewable Energy Development Limited. Sir, your opening remarks, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really delighted to be part of this panel discussion on the eve of a Wind Day celebration organized by NIWE and in association with, organized by MNRE in association with NIWE, IWPA and other organizations. My special thanks to MNRE and also Mr. Jagdale sir for this wonderful other thing. Basically, you all know that India stands number 4 in the total RE capacity after China, USA, Brazil. And as far as Karnataka is concerned, again we stand number 4 in terms of the installed capacity. Excluding hydro, we stand at 16 plus gigawatt. That includes solar and wind. Wind at around 5.8 gigawatt capacity. I mean, which is more than country like Hungary, Ireland, many of the European countries. That's a capacity we have in Karnataka. So, I mean, almost 42% of the energy requirement of Karnataka is coming from RE sources only. So, and 64% of the installed capacity is coming from RE. So that is the achievement of Karnataka, if you see per se. And if you see, look at the total, the potential as such in Karnataka, the 125 gigawatt is the wind potential in Karnataka, which is estimated by NIWE, and around 25 plus gigawatt is the solar potential. There is a huge potential, which can be tapped from in Karnataka. So I take this opportunity to all the investors who can really be partner with us and collaborate with us to explore this huge potential available in Karnataka. I mean, if you go like how it was, this huge capacity, how we added like 16 plus gigawatt, it was not an easy task. Way back from 2009, we bought we were the first southern states to bring in RE policy, renewable energy policy, which really helped in augmenting the growth of RE in the state of Karnataka. So, of course, we are all working on repowering and assisting in all the way. Recently, I bought in 2022-27 policy also, which helps the companies in many ways in setting up, being a base, making a base Karnataka as an investment destination. So with this few remarks in the first round, I just hand over. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's great to hear about all these stories from the states. Let me now turn to Mr. Jagdale, Joint Secretary MNRE. Sir, if you could please talk about a bit of the story of the policies and guidelines around how wind evolved over the last few decades.
Yeah, thank you, Koel. Thank you. Our job is obviously to celebrate the success and the hard work that our states do, because they are the ones, and as I always see, all the 8, 9 states, mostly 8, those who have been striding into this journey. And all these states, if you look back to what Tamil Nadu did, and over these last 3 to 4 decades, every state has come out with their initiativeness at the appropriate time. The pioneer was Tamil Nadu, obviously the geographical advantage, the kind of wind speeds, and the kind of domain. And as sir mentioned, right from banking, it was surprising to see the 83 onwards, the banking concept was coming up. And today also, that is an so important concept going forward that there has been a demand of banking, and especially for wind, it becomes a very critical part of trying to accommodate as much as energy as we can, and then for banking becomes more important. But riding from the success of Tamil Nadu, and I do remember, I was associated with the industry, therefore, whenever it happened from 97, the Karnataka, the journey of Maharashtra, then came Rajasthan, Gujarat obviously was a part, Madhya Pradesh coming in between. So every state has come out with an appropriate policy based on the needs and based on the geographical benefits they have, based on the sites, and everybody has contributed. Whether it's the success story of Maharashtra coming out with the sales tax regime, accelerated depreciation, Rajasthan coming out with very attractive tariffs during the 2003 era, Karnataka being very consistent and a very robust framework of doing the business in terms of the approach, whether it's the cradle, the Department of Energy, and then doing the long-term PPA. And Tamil Nadu obviously opening up the door to the industry, and I'm very happy to note that every t-shirt and most of the cars are produced from greenery. I think this is a good slogan to us to carry on, because today, most of the businesses would have to be green, obviously, just to ensure and be sustainable in the overall global context as we see. The demand is that every industry has to be green. And we are showing that since 1990s, that effort is very, very commendable, as I can see. MNRE, as you all know, at the central level, under the guidance of the Honorable Minister, the directions that he has been giving, we have been making policies, rules, and regulations which are favorable to the renewable energy industry. And if I want to name a few of the last 2 to 3 years, obviously, and if I restrict it to wind, we all know that after the regime that changed, there was a sudden decrease in the kind of installation that one must have seen, one should see. maybe if after 17, 18, that the kind of installations took a little setback, and COVID didn't help that. But last year was a good sign. It has been reviving, and obviously this year, as I see, and as you all have confirmed about your plans, we see where we'll be touching a 5.5 gigawatt. This cannot happen unless you see the support and the initiatives that the state governments do. So we will look forward to that, but starting from the concept of electricity consumer rights to open access rules, to the banking to the RPO regulations, which clearly earmarked wind as a separate stream in terms of the meeting the RPO. And now moving on to the uniform RE tariff rule pooling methodology, which has been released under the set of rules. And this year onwards, the entire tendering that is going to happen will be a part of the pooling. That means the kind of uniformity has been bought is also going to help the states. But as Sir mentioned about the offshore, we have also worked extensively on the offshore concept. Whether it's from the viability gap funding, the seabed leasing, or the new tenders that are going to come. Obviously, a lot of hard work has gone over the last couple of years on bringing offshore. So the forward-looking thought process would be to ride on the success of 43 gigawatts of onshore, taking it to 100 gigawatt in next 7 years, and then also opening up the scoreboard for offshore. I'm hoping that we will be issuing the tenders soon. So before the end of this decade, there will be some gigawatts of offshore wind energy being commissioned, and it will obviously across the coast of Tamil Nadu, being such a wonderful treat in terms of the speeds that the coast has. And Sir mentioned in his opening remarks about the trade, the Gulf that it is being created across the borders of Sri Lanka. And obviously Gujarat, we see similar regimes, maybe a slightly less. So we will have these two states coming with offshore. As far as the wind fraternity, the stakeholder and the message for us to give is that wind will be an integral component. All the studies that have come out do enforce this thought process that wind is critical for the balancing the system, decreasing the system cost, decreasing the kind of energy storage requirements, helping in the basically reduce the load on the ramping requirements, and overall socio-economic impact that one needs in terms of the infrastructure development, in terms of the jobs, growth, manufacturing, all that has led and is going to help us in going forward. While I should say that, I should also compliment the turbine manufacturing industry and the OEMs, which are a part of this, because we have one such country, we can call ourselves, where we have all those manufacturers in-house, having their assembly production units in India. We have a robust framework for approving those under the RLMA methodology. We have Bureau of Indian Standards coming up with some more certification and quality order schemes to ensure there is a quality that is being maintained, and also helping the repowering going forward. We have a couple of very good consulting testing organizations across the globe which are housed in the southern part of our country. And over and above that, the framework that has been created for the last 23 years in terms of the National Institute of Wind Energy. Wind is one such technology resource, which I can say is complete in terms of a country that would require when it is looking forward for a robust regulatory framework. And therefore, I would also commend and applaud the Nive's contribution to this, and would equally compliment now the developers who have believed in the regulatory framework of the center, of the state, the grid, which is a very, very enabling framework in our entire penetration of more renewable energy, because if you go to any other country, you would not find such a robust grid with such a massive amount of absorption capacity that it has. So therefore, compliment goes to the grid controller, the Central Electricity Authority of India, the power grid. All these are very robust pillars of the overall institution that India has created. And I see these as success stories which today most of the countries are envying, most of the countries are following. And this is the strength that will take us forward to have maximum RE penetration. Our journey doesn't end at 2030, it doesn't end at 500 gigawatt. We're looking for a net zero scenario. Offshore wind, onshore wind, and with other technologies will going to play a very, very key and eminent role in our energy transition. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, and also for giving that vision for the future for wind. You also spoke about jobs and manufacturing and domestic manufacturing potential, which brings me to our final speaker, Mr. J.P. Chalsani, Group CEO of Suzlon Energy. Suzlon is synonymous with wind. Many of us have been investors in Suzlon since the day they started. So it's a great success story for India. I would like you to reflect, Mr. Chalsani, not just on Suzlon, but also what energy transition means for domestic manufacturing and growth and jobs in India.
Thank you so much. I think the one uniqueness of me sitting here is everyone on the right side of me are the policy creators. I think I'm the only person who's a policy seeker, representing the people who are policy seekers. So I think I bring that different perspective. When I was thinking about it, my experience predominantly has been in the fossil fuel sector, the very long career of 4 decades. But one uniqueness of wind, which I think many times we forget and we forget to celebrate, is that the most other sectors, whether they take it as coal or nuclear or hydro, the initial thrust, or most of the thrust for over the decades has been by the government investments. The government created the capacity, whether it's the fossil fuel capacity or the nuclear or hydro, and the 75 we had NTPC, NHPC, then big wave, we developed that. It's mainly the government-driven investments, government-driven capacity creation. Subsequently, after reaching certain stage, certain mass, we said that, okay, let's open it up for private sector. That's where the 91, 92, it got opened up, and then private sector started coming into fossil fuel. But if you look the other side of the wind sector, government has been the enabler. But the entire drive right from the day one came from Indian small entrepreneurs, predominantly the small entrepreneurs. Like what Mr. Rajesh was talking about, the Tamil Nadu, if you look at it as, it's a hub for wind. Okay? These are the people who created the demand for the wind. These are the people who thought about the creating wind capacity. Some of the people, of course, created because there was an accelerated depreciation, various reasons. But the entire capacity creation all along, now you will see the companies like NTPC and others investing, but the whole ecosystem for wind has been completely been created by the private sector. Predominantly the small entrepreneurs, and then now we got into a much bigger entrepreneurs. We have the international funds coming in, everybody is coming in, but those are the people who brought in. The same is the case on the manufacturing side of it. So in fossil, we had BHEL, mainly supplying for most of the equipment for ages together. But in the wind sector, it's again the private sector which came in. So therefore, I think one of the celebrations for the wind sector is which showcases the India's entrepreneurship, okay? Where the government, the true spirit of what we talk about, government should be an enabler, and the private sector should invest and then be the engine. I think that's a right example of the wind sector. So that's how it whole thing got created. While I wear the hat of a group CEO of Suzlon, but I will just remove that hat for some time and say that in the success story, one can't forget in the Indian wind sector, the role played by Suzlon. I'm not saying this because I represent Suzlon today, but looking from outside, looking at the power sector professional, I think the one man who really needs to be remembered on every global wind day is Mr. Tulsi Tanti. I think he had been that person who didn't belong to Suzlon. He belonged to the Indian wind industry. He was the person who thought about wind when nobody was talking about it. He is the only person who thought that the technology is the most important thing if you want to grow in the wind, having created a technology center in India and outside India, most importantly. So I think today when we say that every 1 out of 3 turbines in India belong to Suzlon, the 20 gigawatts of the global one, some of these people we need to celebrate, not because he's strong as anybody else, and these are the people who actually created that atmosphere for the wind to grow in this country. These are the celebrations which we need to remember in each of the years. That's having said about what is uniqueness of wind, the private sector, the retail people, how they played the role, small entrepreneurs, how played the role. Now we reach a stage, this is my first, the policy seeking is that we need to rethink that how do we actually make these smaller players, retail players, coming in much more significant way when we have larger capacities getting added. You know, we're doing 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts, 500 megawatts. Fine, like we just celebrated the Gujarat having the most open access things. But I think more need to be done. How do we ensure that the people who actually been the pioneers of wind industry get back into this? Because the 5-6 years after we got into the competitive bidding, that has come down because their participation is coming down. And the states, for various reasons, we do have these issues with respect to banking, open access, and this will continue. That's because there are some conflicting objectives of the generation sector versus the distribution sector, which is a completely different topic. We need to think about that. But having said that, obviously energy transition is the subject what we've been talking about. Today it's fine. Though we are at 25-26% of in terms of installed capacity share. When I'm talking about 25-26%, it's wind and solar put together, not just the wind. Our energy generation today, our share is only about 10-11%. So therefore, it's a completely different story. But the moment we get on to the 300 plus 100, 400 gigawatts of wind and solar, that energy transition becomes very important. When it becomes a mainstay for the grid, that's where today we're talking about how do we get into RTC, how do we get into, obviously there is nothing like wind versus solar, which I've been always saying, it's always the wind and solar together only can sustain, plus the storage capacity. Even when we achieve the 500 gigawatts of the renewable energy or 400 gigawatts of wind and solar, we're still talking about 30-31% of energy from this. How do we increase the energy generation from renewables and make it as a mainstay? We're still a long way to go. And more important to achieve that is, while we talk about RTC and various these things, but especially for the wind industry, and the one which we always talk about is 5.5 gigawatts, what we did in FY17. But the reason why it happened at that point of time was that in multiple states, we were doing the wind capacity addition at that point of time, not in one single state. But then came February 17 when we had the competitive bidding system, because it was not a state-specific system, then everybody had to bid in the states where you have a higher generation. So we just started doing only Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. So therefore, there's a concentration of things. So therefore, you can't do a larger capacity. Plus, we had got into problems of the tariffs being not remunerative for whatever the reason. It's a participant's thing. But now those two getting resolved, Mr. Sekdar, especially congratulations to the MNRE, basically resolving these two issues alone, getting back into close bidding so that they will see some sanity in terms of tariffs, and most importantly, saying that state-specific 8 states will have wind generation coming in, I think would actually will add for our capacity to increase how much megawatts we do each year. That's going to be a significant change. But then one more, the thing to be thought about is it's not just the number of states what you do with the size of the turbine going up. You are enabling the mechanism what is required for that. Whether you talk about the cranes, you talk about your logistics, are going to be a challenge. Anything to do more than 5 gigawatts, it's feasible, but challenging. So unless each one of us also look at those aspects of it, so if you want to do 10 gigawatts, 11 gigawatts in a year, there's a tremendous task. It's a tremendous task to go ahead to create that sort of enabling environment. We need to move beyond the policy framework of saying that we will do 8 state-specific bidding to also creating that necessary infrastructure, encouraging people to bring in that infrastructure, because people are not bringing that infrastructure because there's no consistency. In the last 5 years, we've been between 1,800 to 2,200 megawatts. So while we talk about 5 gigawatts and 10 gigawatts, the people have to come and invest. Some of those areas is what I think the moving ahead, we need to concentrate and see that how do we reach not just 5.5, what we did in FY17, want to reach what 8 gigawatts, 10 gigawatts. It's a much bigger task for us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that first round of sharing of experiences. We have 15 more minutes, and I do want to come back to the panel on where do we go from here. I think some challenges, ways we deal with evolving technology as wind evacuation challenges, all of that. I do want to come back to the panel on that, but let me also open this up a little bit to the audience. Maybe take 2 or 3 questions, insights, your own stories, because like I mentioned in the beginning, it's not just people and institutions on the panel, but also expertise that lies within this room and outside. So if you have any thoughts, reflections, questions, would be happy to take maybe 2 or 3 of those at this point. You can raise your hand if you... People, we see one hand. You also please feel free to, like I said, share insights, your own inspirational stories, because this is all about celebration. Yes.
Yeah, this is Jami Hussain here, and very nice to hear all these discussions, and very interesting. Particularly one on Tamil Nadu, where you mentioned the textile, the t-shirts, and the cars. Another thing which is manufactured in Tamil Nadu is wind turbines. So perhaps they are also green wind turbines. But I was just thinking about what Mr. Chalsani said about, doing 10 gigawatt, 8 gigawatt, 5 gigawatt kind of thing per year is very difficult and a challenging task. And one of the issues there is the grid, the transmission corridor and the substations and things like that. And earlier, in the times of Mr. Tulsi Tanti, for example, there was a very big project which came up in Dhule, where the entire substation and everything, I think, was made by Suzlon on behalf of, the electricity board. So can such a thought be done for a CTU kind of thing, where, in sort of a PPP mode that somebody comes in, builds a transmission line, builds a connectivity and green corridor, and gets other developers into it. This might speed up the process, because PGCIL or CTU, they have their own risks and their own processes, which will also take time. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience would like to? Yes. See a hand back there.
Thank you. First of all, hearty congratulations to everyone on the dais and in the room for the Global Wind Day celebrations. I also wanted to convey my special thanks on behalf of the Global Wind Energy Council. I am Martin Shardul, Policy Director at the Global Wind Energy Council. I'm very glad that the way we have been moving forward on the renewable energy discourse in the country, as much as we are moving now on the wind sector. I see and our stakeholders believe that from competition between renewables in the country, we have moved towards complementary between renewables. And on that note, I wish to congratulate the government of Tamil Nadu for mentioning about the story from textile sector, which we had documented last year during the release of our Tamil Nadu Wind Energy Roadmap. We see that now there are tenders that are coming, which are promoting RTC, which are promoting hybrid projects, but in Tamil Nadu, we don't see a policy, state level policy promoting hybrid tenders. We are also seeing that institutions like Tata Steel are now willing to put in captive units of hybrid power plants. So how do we, number one, from the state's perspective, promote that kind of policy wherein captive hybrid units are built? How do we see that financing for those kind of units are made available to institutions like the textile workers? How the manufacturing sector outside the wind industry gets access to finance to put in those kind of infrastructure in place? And number three, of course, is that how do we build synergies between different types of tenders that are coming? I understand that we have been doing load forecasting for a good time, but now I think we also have to see that within the subsectors, how the demand for RTC is building up and whether we have the right capacities in place to feed to that emerging need. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just take one last, yes.
Good morning. Since we are celebrating the Global Wind Day, so I want to actually remember one gentleman who is among us here. I would request Sri Madhusudan Kemka to please come forward, because he along with his brother, Mr. Rajkumar Kemka, were the first company as NEPC Mycon who introduced a commercial turbine in India way back in 1990. I think it's a honor and a pleasure to have you here, sir. And many people would have forgotten NEPC Mycon, but I think you actually started off the wind journey, and the photograph outside actually is an indication of what you did. And of course, he came back as Region Power Tech later on, and I think we all are grateful to him. And sir, please, I think you should be here in the first row. Yeah. So just only to remember him, thank you.
Sir, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. U.B. Reddy, my good friend, and my respect to all people on the dais. Sir, it's really heartening to see that we are touching 43 gigawatt, but long way to go. And foundation is strong. We have very robust industry. We have very robust, policy framework. So we have built the foundation, but the real building has to come yet, because our needs are so huge that we cannot meet these needs only by doing 2 gigawatt a year. We need to do 20 gigawatt a year. And sir, one thing which we see even today, we largely depend on foreign technologies, lot of imports, though we are exporting nearly 10 gigawatts a year from the country. But within country, we do only 2 gigawatt. There's a huge gap. So our progress within the country has to be well distributed, as Mr. Chalsani was telling. It has to be well distributed among all the potential states. And we must achieve 10 gigawatt a year, not only on paper, but also on field. And indigenization, local technology, everything will come automatically once we have the market. With 2 gigawatt, we cannot expect indigenization, local technologies. Let's create a market for 10 gigawatt plus, and everything will start happening in India. And we will also be doing export of Indian, locally designed wind turbine, locally manufactured wind turbines. So wish everyone a wonderful time ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the questions and reflections from the audience also leads to, we'll come back to you, ma'am, if this time remaining, we'll come back to you. I think this also leads to sort of the way ahead, and wind as a technology is evolving. Hub heights are increasing. The kind of bids we are seeing, I think this was the last wind-only bid we saw. We may not see more of those. We'll see more hybrid, round the clock. As renewable penetration gets, sort of the share of renewables increases in the grid, how do we account for grid flexibility? So all those questions are coming up, and that's where I wanted to pivot for the next round of reflection. Maybe we'll get 2 minutes again in the same order. Just reflections on where do you see sort of the role of policy, as we heard a few of the questions, the role of the new kind of bids and tenders we will see, and also the role of domestic manufacturing in all of this going forward as we talk about more wind penetration and largely more renewable penetration into the grid. So Mr. Lakhoni, again, starting quick reflections, 2 minutes each.
Mr. Koel, repeating your question still will take more than 2 minutes. Anyway.
Please.
Yeah. No, I just want to address here, because I had a big list of do's and what is challenges and what is expected, not from state government as well as MNRE. Now, one is, I think I just want to give a thought. I think someone, he also mentioned, and I think from the other gentleman also mentioned about the issue. Now, what kind of growth model we need for wind development? Presently, I know Tamil Nadu grew because of a decentralized model. Individual people came and put the wind turbine. That model, because of the costing issue, it was feed-in tariff. The tariff used to be fixed by regulator, the 3 rupees, anyone can put a windmill, and people used to come and put it, and they used to hedge their power cost. Now that model has undergone a change because we became very cost sensitive and we started going on bidding model. Now when you do a bidding model, there are two, that also is a good, one advantage is that all the pension funds can bring in and park their money and they take the return. But effectively, we are removing all the small investors. India has a big, small companies, they also need to hedge their costs. So we are effectively removing them from the wind field. Because a big 1 gigawatt park or maybe 500 megawatt park means someone who is having 500 into some 5 crores, 2,500 crores money only can bid, or who had access to that money. So my question to MNRE is that, okay, discovering the cost is now, we have discovered the cost of the feed-in tariff model, which has been discontinued, should also continue. And we have to slightly undergo a different change in model also. Instead of allowing wind farm developers to bring in investment for putting wind farm, a wind turbine as well, we should have two models. One model is that someone will develop a wind farm, that is aggregate the land, he will provide micrositing and other things, he will provide maintenance opportunity. Suppose I want to put a windmill, I can go and plant a windmill there and then you can do the captive thing. That model is missing. And I think there where the opportunity lies with Mr. Bhargav, NTPC's renewable energy, they should come in and they develop a wind farm. Whether they bring in the money for putting windmill or not is secondary issue. But once they do a wind farm, more so in offshore, then individual people can come and put a windmill there and use the captive power. Because I think that why windmill, why wind when solar will develop long time, people like to hedge their power costs, so they will like to have open access and captive consumption. Now, captive consumption rule has a major disadvantage. Now, it's an advantage, a major lacuna. It says that investment has to be 26% for it to wheel for captive consumption. Now, for 26% investment, in the sense if you do a 500 megawatt wind farm, then the company has to be really big. The small 5 crore, 10 crore turnover company cannot go and participate. So I think that is one model I think MNRE should really work on promoting. That solar or wind farm developer in which lot of people plug and play kind of thing. Farm is developed by some independent person, he does the maintenance thing. Someone can keep putting windmill or solar farm, whatever farm. Now some complementary is there. So that will really allow small investors and MSME and small industries to use the advantage of renewable energy for manufacturing. That is one major issue which perhaps we have to allow. Second thing is that another policy direction is that feed-in tariff has been totally discontinued because for the fear that feed-in tariff is high and we have to reduce the cost of RE for development. Feed-in tariff maybe not in the original form where it was calculated, in a new form where the discovered price. So we will have to work out a model, that discovered feed-in model, that one in a year, if suppose Tamil Nadu had discovered price of wind energy or solar is 3 rupees, then that full year or maybe 6 months, someone should be allowed to discover instead of going for bidding on that thing some time frame so that people have certainty or the cost for completion, that kind of thing. A third thing, because we are the early developer of wind energy, we have a lot of challenges and we expect that a lot of policies have to come. Now still the decommissioning of wind models and wind thing is done, is regulated by MNRE, which windmills to continue, which old turbines have to discontinue. I think we have to bring in more visibility in the decommissioning modes and decommissioning model, and we'll have to come out with clear policy direction. Now, then again, repowering, we have a major challenge. One major challenge is because out of 10 gigawatts, 7 gigawatt is retail investor we have done. And we don't have newer, greener sites. We have only brownfield, in the sense we have to do repowering. Now, what we'll have to do is perhaps what is captive use, the 26% investment requirement will have to be appropriately modified, because these small retailers will come for a redevelopment or repowering, not as an individual, but as a group, because the land requirement will change. So unless the rule about open access and captive consumption is changed, these individual people have no incentive to actually go for bigger machines. So that is another area in which perhaps we will have to work on policy directions. I have a lot of things. Can I take one or two more issues? Now, another issue which I like to flag all, because your developers are there, actually you should not ask for ISTS waiver. Because a transmission waiver creates a lot of issues. I've been telling all over the place, the transmission waiver creates burden on the cost on the state. So they'll not be able to provide you wind, because how the transmission cost by PGCL, I think Mr. Sridhar has left, otherwise I am a bigger critique of him. How the transmission charges are calculated is not actually based on how much energy is transmitted from that particular point to my state. It depends upon how much power I am buying from outside the state. Now take the case of Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, maybe forget about Karnataka, maybe Rajasthan. These are the major renewable energy states, and most of the states don't have coal mines. So they'll be buying power from outside. So if ISTS waiver is there, that cost is there. There's nothing called free. That is a transmission cost. This transmission costs are shared by these 5-6 states. So we are the states which are developing renewable energy, and we have to bear the transmission cost as well. So the ISTS waiver, it appears very great, but it creates skewness in system. I think we'll have to work out a method of doing away with it. Then there are two more issues I'll mention. Sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but I am very passionate about wind and solar, and we'll have to solve the problems, otherwise we'll hit some grid blockage. Now, another issue is that is micro-siting. Now, micro-siting, why micro-siting is required? Micro-siting is required because basically safety concern, the installation requirement concern, and second thing is wake effect, in the sense that the wind turbine is running, the adjacent turbine cannot be put because the generation will not be sufficient because of the wake effect. Wake is what is that wind, once the turbine, it draws, the wind gets affected, turbulence it creates, which gets affected generation. Now, I request anyway, I've been telling Mr. Jagdal that we have to do a study the study has to be in region-wise, like Tamil Nadu-wise, Gujarat-wise, and find out what is the optimum micro-siting requirement. Presently, states based on some thumb rule have gone for micro-siting, which is leading to uneconomical utilization of wind potential area, because wind potential is in very limited area. So they'll have to work out what is that optimal micro-siting required at various heights. Once that is done, perhaps I think repowering and other newer, because now Gujarat and Rajasthan are newer windmills are coming, so they can use that area more effectively. Then lastly, I'll just like to, two other things I'd like to make is forecasting. I think we are just using international agencies for forecasting, but the wind patterns here are entirely different. I think, again, I have Mr. Bhargav. I think someone has to come and start investing. Forecasting doesn't require some great technology. It basically requires mapping of all winds, mapping the wind curve, getting the best wind data in the world, and then generating the output out of it, using AI to basically generate. That requires a lot of computer programming. We are working with some agencies, and we are some success, but still forecasting is something which some agency will have to really work and develop. That will really help people to come for wind energy growth. And lastly, there are two other issues, but I'll mention only one is wind brings in one more issue of reactive power, because wind is actually active power. I think we'll have to go on some research on how do you bring in reactive power balancing in wind turbine itself when you're putting it, because otherwise it causes a lot of low voltage and other issues in the grid, which becomes a major issue. There are a lot of other issues because there's so many people, so I will not like to take majority of the time. But I think wind has a lot of scope, and as I say, wind is the only energy source as on date which can replace thermal source, because it is almost RTC. Someone mentioned complementary of wind thing, because a lot of land is wasted. So I think we can always put some solar on that, but still that transmission evacuation requirement becomes too big. So that causes major concerns on RTC in wind and solar hybrid. But anyway, that is an opportunity, because otherwise land gets wasted. So these are the major issues, few issues, there are other issues as well. I think we'll have to start addressing those issues if we want a rapid development of wind energy. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for bringing out those issues. A lot of food for thought for many of us in the room. Let me quickly turn to Mr. Sawant, if you have anything to add, sir.
I think as far as renewable energy is concerned, on policy front, we have been receiving quite a few suggestions, but then one particular issue is coming very frequently to us, and we have been trying to sort it out. And those who have invested in Rajasthan, they must be knowing this issue, that if we want to increase potential installation of renewable energy, only utility scale projects are not going to serve the purpose. Besides utility scale projects, industries, they are more than willing to install wind as well as solar. But then there is issue that they don't want to invest for themselves. If they invest for themselves, then it's quite easy because it will be considered as captive consumption. And then they will have to only pay transmission charges and wheeling charges from their generation point to consumption point. Most of them want to invest somebody else because it's investing into renewable sector, and generation of renewable energy is not their core competence. So they want to invest somebody else. The moment somebody else comes into picture, it becomes third-party generation, and then there are additional charges, additional surcharge as well as cross-subsidy. And then it becomes a great disincentive for them. So Rajasthan, we are sort of facing a dilemma because these two charges, they are substantial charges which are contributing to the kitty of the discoms. At the same time, it is working as disincentives for industries who want to invest into renewable, but they do not want to implement project for themselves. So we have worked some plan for that, and we want to sort of strike a golden mean so as to sort this problem. But if at all those who are especially having presence in Rajasthan, if they are having any suggestion, I would like to listen to those suggestions. Otherwise, we have done some plan and we are going ahead to sort out this issue of disincentive created by additional surcharge and cross-subsidy. So I think this point I thought is relevant for today's discussion, and accordingly I am mentioning this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, over to you if you highlight some of the issues going forward.
Rajesh sir has mentioned all the challenges in the wind field. I'll make this forum what Karnataka has an advantage for all of you. Like I was mentioning that Karnataka has a potential of around more than 125 gigawatt. But the critical factor to harness this potential is the evacuation. I'm really happy to inform you that Karnataka has got the maximum number of evacuation projects going on. That's Gadag 1, Gadag 2, Koppal 1, Koppal 2, and Bidar and Bijapur. These are the 6 evacuation schemes which are going on in the Karnataka. So I think that will be a very interesting factor for any of the investor to come and explore our state. Apart from that, one more initiative what we have done, we have purchased data from Niue, that's a wind potential at height of around 120 feet. And that we have hosted on our website, Cradle website, which is, investors can make use of that. Apart from that, quickly I'll just mention a couple of projects which we are working on. One is we are working on a 5 gigawatt hybrid project where wind share is, bigger, especially in northern part of Karnataka. We are just, I think, the DPR is under preparation. Maybe in maybe in 15 days or 1 month we'll finalize the DPR. So there will be a bigger opportunity. The 5 gigawatt is a bigger scale. I mean, we're also talking to NTPC. And we are working on pumped hydro storage project of 3000 megawatt in Karnataka. Already one tender is out and another 2 tenders are being prepared. We are working on the BESS project, battery storage project, and also on the floating solar. So these are a couple of projects which we are working on. Just with this mention, I just conclude. I once again take this opportunity to welcome to Karnataka. Definitely will welcome you the red carpet. Thank you once again for this opportunity created by MNRE. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jagdale, I'll give you the last word. Let me go to Mr. Chalsani first, and if you could add to sort of how the future from your perspective looks like.
I have only one more point to add, is that the whole sector, if you look at it, from utility PPA, which has been the predominant player in the last few years, where you have the agencies coming up and saying that there will be PPA with the DISCOM back to back. From that, we are now moving away to a large C&A segments. That's happening because globally, if you want to be competitive, even if you want to export, whether it's a steel or the cement or the refining or everything, that you need to get converted into green. Okay, so otherwise you really can't export, or more than that, there is a voluntary commitments of net zero. So therefore, that segment is going to play a much bigger role today. And those, the capacities, what they will be installing are going to be huge capacities. Each one of them, whether it's Tata or anyone else, you can look at 1,000 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts, 3,000 megawatts type of a capacities. So therefore, the requirement for that segment is going to be different from where you have utility PPA, because utility PPA, based on utility PPAs, you're creating grid, then other issues. That needs, while we continue to work on, we should work on the retail, which we talked about, getting that segment back for investments. But the large industries is what will be the next segment of investments in the country. Especially when you're talking about 7, 8 gigawatts, 10 gigawatts in a year. These are the people who are, there's a huge demand coming up there. But how do you address the concerns there on the policy level and then encourage those investments coming in? Because significant advantage there is that relatively the tariff sensitivity is less there compared to utility PPA. Utility PPA, beyond you go a certain point, then you don't get PSAs, the DISCOMs will be reluctant to sign. But here, because they're looking at a different angle, tariff sensitivity not being that great. It's important for everybody, tariff sensitivity. So they will be able to add capacity. And that's where I think the next segment of policy makers, all of who are sitting here, to get in those policies. And more important is this, because we're just 8 states, we're talking about every state, can these 8 state regulators with the MNRE help or with the CERC help have consistency in policies in these 8 states? Okay. So if you have a green open access, but then implementation becomes a huge issue because the electricity being a concurrent list. So how do we make these 8 states have a similar type of policies closer to each other? Fine. Each state will have a different type of requirements depending upon their financial conditions, depending upon their the consumption pattern, things like that, but still to the extent possible. So get that uniformity of policy. And second thing is that next wave is going to be significant capacity addition coming from the C&A segment of use capacity. How do we actually encourage? And the third is that get back this, as Mr. Rajesh again debated, that the small investors back onto the wind sector. I think these are 3 things which I will say.
Thank you, Mr. Jagdale. Last reflections from you.
Thank you. I think we exceeded time, but just to have a round of briefly about touching on all the points. But first of all, I think what Mr. Jami mentioned, Marthan and Khemkaji mentioned, yes, we acknowledge their suggestions. Hybrid is going to play an important role. Evacuation, by the way, evacuation, there has been a huge effort from CA and CTU on making a robust transmission plan so that we can evacuate excess of 500 gigawatt of non-fossil. There has been a green energy corridors, the sites have been identified, and as our state colleagues mentioned, the pockets, the land availability, resource availability, what kind of resource, there is a lot of micro planning done. And under the general network access rules, I think the evacuation, the long-term open access, seeking application and getting that timely done, is an effort made by all the pillars of the central government, and I'm sure going forward this will be not a hurdle but an enabler in terms of how we are moving. States are equally participating in that. Apart from the ISTS grid, obviously the STU network is being made very strong. The second point, retail, I do concur and I do second all the suggestions made by all, because retail is an absolute important segment. We do recognize, and in our assessment, when we did the assessment of the wind sector for the last 3 to 4 years, we had zeroed in on some kind of a methodology. Obviously, that work is still under progress, but I'm sure with all the consistency in the support that we are seeking from the stakeholders, we'll be able to get that. But for me, if I look at the next 8 years from now, obviously the asking rate is very, very high. There has to be a concerted efforts from everybody. But one typical situation which has not changed right from the day the first turbine until now is the on-ground challenges. There has been challenges on ground in terms of land. There has been challenges in terms of the right-of-way, the ROW issue, the transmission issue. I think we will all have to take a little more extra care and effort in seeking the right kind of environment on ground, building the consensus amongst those stakeholders who are a party to those kind of issues. And recently there were some very bad instances, and we will try to find out appropriate solutions by seeking help from the district level administration as well in bringing the discipline in law and order. But that's an important challenge for us to really bring in. The land would be a critical. The other is on the, sir mentioned about the forecasting. The typical turbines, as I see, that are growing in terms of the amount of AI they are using, the amount of knowledge the turbine itself has in terms of able to forecast. So please, there is an equal task from the stakeholders that they will have to assist the grid operator now, both reactive power, forecasting, harmonics, all that are issues which are being highlighted at this stage. You must have, there is a tough stand taken by the grid controller now in terms of not allowing to commission unless the overall system is within the control from the safety perspective, the harmonics perspective, whether it's the low voltage ride through, high voltage ride through. Therefore, CA is making regulations. We'll have to assist. We'll have to ensure turbines are equally capable of meeting those regulations. So equal investment is required from the stakeholders so as to meet these, so as to be on the same strike rate as we are all looking to make that 500 gigawatt. We have to cross 100 gigawatt of wind, and therefore this is an equal, I can say, an appeal from all of us that you should help the grid controller in maintaining the discipline that is required for moving forward. In terms of our plans, you see that we had made the aggressive bidding trajectory. That is on the large scale, but I also do recognize we have the RE park concept, which will enable even the wind developers to go to the same model you are used to. Whether who does what is to be decided by the stakeholders, but RE park concept is under approval. Solar had some success story out of that. Wind is a slightly complex because it's not within a gated area, but still that we have made some effort in bringing that into the concept note, and we are trying to see if we can bring that to the implementation level. Sir mentioned about offshore. Offshore is definitely coming. And that too across the two states, so that will be an equal effort required from all of us. One point, sir, you mentioned about the wake and the micrositing. What we did in our repowering draft also is that we, instead of mentioning any diameter across row and column, we were thinking of having a typical wake loss as a parameter rather than leaving the distances to the developer to choose, because they are the ones who are going to, but the wake loss has to be considered so that adjacent turbines also shouldn't be affected whenever we are putting a new or a repowered wind farm. So that was the feedback that we received, and so therefore in our repowering draft we had mentioned that the wake loss should be the criteria and moving away from the micrositing of 5D or whatever D by D is concerned. But then there are some issues which are coming in terms of the habitat, dwellings, and other issues that are also nowadays being very, very challenged. And a lot of issues go to the become prejudice or subjudice in terms of people going to the court and bringing a lot of stay orders. So that also needs to be really streamlined. We'll have to find a way out. And these are ground issues. These are micro issues which need, and therefore what I see in small right-of-way couldn't get, he commissioned 130 or 8 megawatts. For 20 or 12 megawatts, the site was idle for 2 years because of the right-of-way issue. And such issues we'll have to resolve. That's an important parameter. Decentralize is the way forward. We'll really like to work on this concept. But as I would, instead of you asking, I would like to thank all of you, including the moderator, for moderating this session, and all the active participation from all of you. But before we conclude, my special thanks to both my colleagues, because out of these are not easy times to come out of their headquarters and participate in discussion. But thank to all three of you, sir, to come out and being a part of this this Global Wind Day celebration. Thanks to Mr. Chalsani as well. He is riding on the success of 20 gigawatts. So hats off to all of your efforts, and our prayers to Sri Tulsi Tanti in his remembrance. So ladies and gentlemen, it was a wonderful session, sir. Thank you all of you, and thanks to Koil.
Jagdale sir, as you express these words of thanks, may I request you also to kindly present the special mementos to the speakers. Some of them we've already presented, so thanking Shri Rudrapaya ji. Thanking Shri J.P. Chalsani ji. So some of, okay. And thanking our moderator, Mr. Koel Kumar Mandal. We'll just close with a group photograph. इनके लिए भी. Yeah, it's fun.